I'm going to talk about what's the voice lab. And it all comes from a perspective on voice tech in France, specifically, because that's where we started, but in Europe. And I will talk more what I mean by voice tech. Oops. So when I'm talking about voice tech, I'm talking about everything that has to do with vocal interface. And one of the things that happened that really was incredible over the last few years is that we saw this emergence of the smart speaker, and in the US, it took the market at a fast pace that it even got adoption that's faster than the smartphones, which was previously the fastest technology adopted. And it's probably bullshit. So I won't say those numbers are exact, and they are meaningful in the sense that the word in use is, I believe, a little over. It's maybe more installed than in use, but anyway, we are looking now at things that billions of people have vocal assistant, and they might be using it in some form, and it is growing. And I talk about the US, and I said, now it's already 50% of more than 50% of the households have a vocal assistant. And so if we look at the usual adoption curve, that means they are in the early majority. And most of the other countries are a little behind. And if we look more specifically, we see that some of those, they might be behind, but they are growing even faster than the US. So the adoption is really incredible. If you look, in this case, this is January 2019 numbers of Alexa skills, and you look at how many skills there are, and then that's France, all the way on the bottom here. And as you can guess, I mean that, if you go back to the previous slide, there was no French flag there. And so we are way behind. And for many reasons. And this is really something important, because now if we look from a business point of view, things around voice, it's a market that is going to grow in the next few years in billions or tens of billions. And so for a country like France not to be part of that market is really problematic, if we are looking just as the business side. And it's not only the voice, the technological actors. So this is a figure about car purchasing decision in the US right now. And okay, it's not like people are choosing their car based on the vocal assistant. You see a lot of people, it's still a minor consideration, but this means that still most people take that into consideration when they are making a purchase decision like buying a car. And so we believe that the presence of vocal assistant, which is now growing into every single devices that you might have around your home, is going to be very impactful. And so that means for all the businesses that produce those devices or the ecosystem, the vocal assistant part of it is going to be very important in the next few years. But it has a lot of challenges, and you've probably heard a lot of stories over the last few months around privacy and the issues. And one thing we can look at that there is kind of a war between the different major economical actors in the internet platform, where they are trying to be the one person who's in charge of the interaction with the consumer. And we are looking at huge corporations that have a lot of means. And in a way, if you look at that from a market perspective, it's kind of a race to the $1 trillion market cap, where you have people like Apple and Google, Amazon that are really close to that, and others that are trying to be there. And so how they are doing that, how do they get to those enormous market capitalization, is they are trying to be in every single device, in every single household. And there is 1 billion more people in the next few years that they want to conquer. And if you look from the mobile perspective, we've seen that in the early stage of the smartphone, there were quite some competition, but it ended up being a duopoly. And the question for us in the vocal assistant market is, how are we going to replicate that? Are we going to end up with a duopoly where all the interaction that are vocal needs to go through either Google or Amazon? And that's a big worry for the consumers, because in a way, if you look, there's kind of three forces there. There's the individual, the states, and the corporation. And the corporation, they want to maximize profit. The states, they are supposed to be there to maintain the general welfare. And we want to have as much services as we can to provide the service. But right now, there is a big black hole with what's going on with your data, with what you're providing to those corporations. And in the States, we're starting to see a lot of usage of all those technology for surveillance and censorship. So not that much for the welfare as we were expected. And we won't talk about what happened with all the hacks and all the data that disappear in places where we don't know what it's being used for. Hopefully, there has been the GDPR, which has a lot of complexity for us as a corporation, but do provide benefits for the consumer. But still, at the end of the day, the equilibrium is much more on the corporate, on the state side than on the consumer side. And what we think we should do is try to provide ways for the consumer to recalibrate that by providing them with different opportunities when they consume services. So in a way, the framework that we're looking at is really an issue of antitrust, and sovereignty and privacy issue. So why did I talk about all of that? Because there are a lot of issues that are really specific for the European and the French limitation. So first, if we look at that, so the colors actually correspond to the regions, and the European is green, and as you can see, green is not so much on the map. So we have a big issues, and the problem there is that if we want to be on the map, well, the barrier to entry is very high. If we look at the amount of people that are working on voice technology in companies like Amazon or Nuance, we are looking in the thousands. And the biggest startup in France that's working, well, not startup, but the biggest company in France that's working on voice is going to be couple hundred people. So there is a big step before we have enough manpower to actually catch up. And in a way, behind that, there is a trade war. And if you think about how the internet was, so it was supposed to be something decentralized where everybody has kind of their own the equivalent chance, but now it's becoming more and more a duopoly between two countries that are kind of fighting against each other, and that means that we are no longer in the picture. So why is that? Well, the first thing is, if you look at all those technology, it has to do with languages. And in Europe, well, we have many languages. And not only we have many languages, we have many accents, we have many local particularity, which is much easier for some of those players where they have only one language and they have hundreds of millions of users that have that one language. So that means also there is smaller data available. If you want to do something in French, well, there is currently 900 hours of open source French audio recorded. And it's still with a non-commercial use, so it's not very useful for our companies. And so the capture of data is really favoring the big tech that have the means and the touch points to get all of that data. So it's back to this issue of entry barrier. And to be honest, we are also behind. We started late. So the big question now is, does that mean that all the products from tomorrow, if we are in a vocal world where interfaces is a lot of the interface that we have with technologies through voice, has to go through those vehicles? And that's where there was an initiative at the EU level, which is AI for EU, and that brought us to the creation of the Voice Lab. So what is the Voice Lab? So it's a group of companies that joined me now a year ago on this initiative, and we set up the association only a few weeks back, actually. So we have around 20 companies, all of them are French. We have 10 labs, research labs. So it's pretty much all the labs that are working on voice technology in France. That's the courses to try to create an independent ecosystem where we can standardize some of the interaction to provide an alternatives to both the consumer but also the industrial. So if you are a car maker, you have another opportunity to have an assistant that the two main one, and to provide also the public entities with a solution that protect their independence, their privacy, and their sovereignty. So how do we want to do that? So we first thing we want to build is a marketplace which federates the French and later on the European actors to provide a common place where you can find voice solution. So because one of the issues also is the fragmentation. As I said, we have only a very small player in France. So that means that if you want to do a full project with French actors, well, you need to work with one company for doing the speech to text, another one to do the text to speech, a third one to do the emotion analysis, fourth one to do the NLP. Well, if you are a big project manager at a big bank, well, you will sign with IBM because nobody got fired for signing with IBM. But if you go back and say, hey, I'm going to work with 5 companies, 2 of them are startup, 2 are small, cap French, it's not going to work. So we need to provide a way to have a platform where you can say, okay, well, with the same API, you can do your CRM project in French and your banking, your trade floor project with Finnish. And it's the same API, the same platform, and behind that you have the best Finnish specialist and your best French specialist. And all of that in a neutral environment where the association keep the data, so your data is in a neutral place, is a control place, so you're not providing your data to some corporate actor that might learn things from your data that are not related to voice, but are related to business, and where suddenly you're a bank and one of those actors start doing banking because they learn through you working with you a lot of stuff about the way your customer are doing banking. So to go more in the details, the idea is to create a marketplace with 3 levels. So the first level, which is the one we have started working on, is a data aggregation. So the idea here is to share the data. So it can be tough because a lot of companies feel that data is their trade secret. But at the end of the day, if we look between 2 French companies, they might have their specific data, but they have such a small data set compared to any of the big guys. They better put it together and try working on different segments than keeping their data separate. And so that's working quite well, and we find more and more people that are interested in that. The second level is where we have the technical piece of voice technology. So we are looking at engines like speech to text, text to speech, and NLP. And the idea here is you will both have private ones where you have a company that specializes, like I said, by example, we have these French companies that do very well speech to text for traders that speak English with a foreign accent. Because if you're in London and you go in the trading floor, everybody speaks English, but nobody is English. And so we tried using one of the main American speech-to-text engines, not going to work. So by example, we have a company that's very good at doing that, but they can't do CRM as well as another company. And also some of us are going to work together on an open source speech-to-text engine that might be more like generic, but where we can work together on improving the technology, improving the industrialization, and instead of having a few hundred people here and there, then we can get to the 1,000, which then become competitive compared to the big guys in the US. And then the third level of the marketplace is where we provide full services that are built on those bricks, but that are much more verticals. So by example, in the case of Voxis, my voicemail right now, I do speech to text, I do text to speech, and so instead of using the bricks that I'm using now, I could use some of those. So yeah, I'll go that. So why is that? Why do we think that's an interesting proposal? Because we think we can break a lot of the barriers. So back to what I was saying earlier, it will bring a solution that respects the privacy and the sovereignty for the states and the consumer. It's break the issue of fragmentation. So you have one place where you can go and find the company. I've been talking with a lot of large Fortune 500 companies in the last few months, and most of them, they didn't even know a lot of the number that I have and the solution that they provide. So they didn't know that things exist. So some of them, they are reinventing the wheel, and that's not what they should be doing. So, and yeah, the other idea is that if we manage to do that well in France, and Brexit or not, we get some other countries. England is actually welcome to do that. Yeah, together at the European level, we could have something that is really stronger actually than any single actor can be, because we have at the granularity level companies that are very specialist and they are very good at what they are doing, and no generalist actor will be as good as they are. So we think that can be right. And so we hope to free people from the screens, and so you can get up again and use your voice to interact. So yeah, that's the Voice Lab, and we are working right now on funding with the French and European, for the French government and the European space. So hopefully we can start working early 2020.
Excellent. Thank you, Karel. Any questions for Karel? Starts with Greg.
Because you mentioned about privacy security, which is, honestly speaking, extremely important. Did you consider distributed ledger blockchain technology to secure data? And then I know that this is my data I can allow or not to use it.
So there's one thing that we were launching soon, next week, hopefully, with our friends from Happy Days, is a way for citizens, so that's the first step, where you can use GDPR to request your data back from Google, and say from GDPR they have to give you back your data, and then you can give it to the Voice Lab. Hey, why not? It's your data, you can do whatever. But indeed, there is a certificate, and so if you change your mind because you find that later on that the Voice Lab is screwing you, then you can revert and get back your data. And honestly, for now, it's more of a marketing stunt that we are doing with that. Technically, there are still a lot of issues for distributed learning on voice. So we do have that in mind, and we expect to be able to have things in the second phase where we can no longer have the data actually in the association, but the data can stay with the clients, with the person, and we can make the learning there and just bring back the models. But it's, for now, technically, it's not mature enough.
Abhijit?
You started a presentation with Alexa and Google and some stats around it, and then in one of the slides you mentioned that these solutions, the American and Chinese solutions, are not compatible with French and I'm trying to understand what do you mean by compatibility? Because last I checked, Alexa and Google Assistant supported French language. Is there something which?
No, so maybe I wasn't very clear. So it works in France, so you can use Alexa, but there is much less skills. So the number of applications available are much less, and there is a big privacy issue, which is. So, by example, I talked to a bank, and the bank said, "Okay, so we want to learn about vocal, so we worked on a vocal assistant, so for FAQ, where you can ask Alexa, hey, how do I do a transfer to Alan? And so, if you want to transfer Alan, you do this. But the bank doesn't want to have the skill where I can actually do the transfer, because for them, the idea that Amazon or Google can hear that I am transferring money to him, and then the amount, and then they learn from who is paying what, and then they make a bank offering, because they have done that in the past, as we mentioned in the last few days, by example in the call center skill, where they provide you with the API and then they provide you with the service. So that's the issue.
So it's more about creating control and being concrete as to what.
Yeah, the bank, they want to have a vocal assistant, but they want to make sure they control the vocal assistant and they keep the relationship with the user, because that's their car. And if tomorrow all those appliances, the vocal interaction is controlled by a third party, then all those manufacturers, they are losing part of the relationship that they paid a lot of money to get you to buy their car, their fridge, or whatever.
Rob.
How is your project, or have you thought about collaborating with Common Voice, the Mozilla project, on some of these audio process?
I'm recorded, yeah. So
You are live streamed.
okay. So look at the funding of the Mozilla Foundation, and you will understand why they are not yet very happy with, by example, the thing I described just before, using GDPR to get data from some place and to another place, might not be very well come from some of their funding partners.
Any other questions?
Regarding EU funding, do you think this is eligible for Horizon 2020 or?
So honestly, it's so complicated. So currently we're working at the French level. When we started having discussion, I think it won't be Horizon 2020, but they have new program that is starting at the European level for AI for EU, but it's changing all the time. But yeah, they are at the European level or even at the bilateral level. So there was actually discussion between the French president and the German president very recently, and so we might be starting at the bilateral work with just Germany and France for starter, but we also still have conversation with people in Norway, in Finland, and so.
So this is open only for companies and both for universities and
No, so
EU countries.
So yeah, it would be open for anyone in a way, as long as you share the mindset. So yeah, for the research partner in France, by example, I don't know enough about the rest of Europe, but they are very involved, because for them the issue they are having now is they can't do the latest technology research, because most of the research that is the latest trends require massive data, and so they are restricted to some type of research that they can do with small data, and so they don't get a researcher, because the researchers go to private labs where they can actually get the amount of data they like to do the latest cool stuff. So for them, it's very important to have some project like that. So that's why we have in France, like I said 10, I think it's like 100% of the labs that work in tech that are part of the initiative.
Mark,
Yeah, that was last comment. Like as an example, the German language, as you've seen, there was a German flag on it. Germans tend to be less paying attention to the sovereignty thing, but there are like 100 million native German speakers in the world, which is not enough for the big techs to really invest into that language. As a matter of fact, I can understand there are a lot of companies that do specific that language. They're much better than the big techs, because with them, this is really, there's no business case in really investing into that language. And then anyone, like, if you're from Finland, I guess it's even more desperate, right? So so I see the point to actually take the specialized language expertise, because the big techs would not invest into languages that do not have 2 or 3, 500 million people speaking language.
Yeah. So that's how to take your weakness and make it a strength.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like there's a chance here. Then the serenity comes back, and you say, okay, if we can support 20 European languages, because we're better at this than the big techs, because it's not good for them. It's not good, not big enough. Then I think there might be traction that has a plus on the other aspects, which are not just the quality language. So Alexa, for instance, is a good example. it's a pain in German to do skills. My wife is doing this for money, right? So Alexa is so bad at German language that they suffer from creating meaningful skills. English is working perfectly, but I mean, he's doing it for kids. In kids' language, which is even easy, right? And even here, you have a lot of limitations.
Yeah, it's exactly what I said about the weaknesses. Is the French, when I say it's very small, it's also one of the reasons. I mean, Microsoft launched the French speech-to-text only a couple, it's maybe a year now, but it was much later than the other language. And I would suspect it's because they had a hard time getting enough data. And then they launched, but the quality wasn't there at the beginning, at least.
So, because of time.
Sorry. Happy to discuss that.
Again, excellent.